Ever find yourself wondering what really makes someone break the law? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're jumping headfirst into the world of criminology to try and make sense of it all. I mean, really think about it. Why do people do things that hurt others, that go against everything we've agreed on as a society? It seems like a simple question on the surface, but underneath? Oh, it's a rabbit hole of complex, fascinating answers. And that's exactly where we're headed. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to tackle this from a few different angles. First, the big ideas. Why does crime even happen? Then we'll look at who tends to commit it. After that, how we actually measure the stuff, which is trickier than you'd think. Then we'll cover how we try to respond to it. And finally, we'll explore who really shapes our ideas about crime in the first place. Sound good? Let's go. All right, first things first, why does crime happen? This is the big one. And honestly, criminologists have been fighting about this for centuries. Their ideas are all over the map, often clashing in what's basically a battle of theories. Okay, so this first one is a bit of a mind-bender. There was this sociologist, Emil Durkheim, and he came out with this wild idea. What if crime is normal? And not just normal, but maybe even necessary for society to function. Yeah, you heard me right. His whole point was that when someone commits a crime and we all collectively get outraged, it actually strengthens our bonds. It reminds us all what we believe in, what our shared values are. Kind of weird, but it makes you think. Now that brings us to a huge debate in modern criminology. It's the big showdown, right realism versus left realism. Both of them are trying to get real, practical answers about crime, but boy, they come at it from totally opposite directions. So on one side, you've got the right realists. For them, it's all about the individual. They're looking at things like poor socialization, kids not being taught right from wrong or how to control their impulses. And then there's this idea of rational choice. It's like a cost-benefit analysis. A potential criminal weighs it up. What are the odds I get caught versus what do I stand to gain? If the reward looks good enough, they go for it. It really boils down to individual responsibility and control. But then you have the left realists, and they completely flip the script. They say, hang on, you can't just blame the individual. You have to look at society. For them, the root cause is inequality. And it's not just about being poor. It's about what they call relative deprivation. Imagine you're constantly bombarded with ads for stuff you can never afford. You feel left out, left behind. That frustration, they argue, can push people, especially those on the margins of society, into subcultures where breaking the rules starts to look like a pretty reasonable option. And if you want to take that idea even further, you get to the Marxist perspective. For them, it's not just about inequality within the system, the entire system is the problem. They'd say that capitalism itself basically breeds crime. Criminogenic is the word they use. Why? Because it's built on competition, greed, and selfishness. And get this, they argue the law isn't neutral. It's a weapon wielded by the rich and powerful to protect their stuff, while the really big crimes, the corporate ones, often get a slap on the wrist, if that. Okay, so that's a lot of theory, right? We've got clashing ideas about why crime happens, but what do the numbers say? What does the data show us about who is actually committing these crimes? Let's dig into the patterns. So here's one of the most solid, undeniable facts in all of criminology. No matter where or when you look, men commit way, way more crime than women. I mean, the gap is huge. So the big question is, why? Well, theories are all over the place. Some say it's down to how boys and girls are raised differently. Others point to something called patriarchal control. The basic idea being that, historically, women's lives have been more restricted and controlled, giving them fewer opportunities to even get involved in crime. And it's not just about gender. These patterns show up everywhere. Take age, for example. Crime rates spike among young people. Why? One idea is status frustration. You're young, you want to be someone, but the normal paths, school, jobs, feel blocked. So you find other ways to get status. Then there's social class, which is often tied to deprivation, and even where you live matters. The famous Chicago school did this study and found crime was concentrated in what they called zones of transition. Think chaotic, rundown inner-city neighborhoods. It really proved that your environment can have a massive impact. But wait a second, how do we even know any of this? How do we get these numbers in the first place? It sounds easy, right? Just count the crimes. But trust me, it's one of the thorniest problems in this entire field. Whenever you see a headline that says crime is up or crime is down, what they're almost always talking about are the official police stats. This is the stuff that gets reported to the police and that the police actually write down. And for decades, that's pretty much all we had to go on. So, does that give us the complete picture? No way, not even close. Think about it. What about all the crimes people never report? Maybe they're embarrassed or scared or just think it's not worth the hassle. And what if the police decide not to record something? All of a sudden, those official numbers start to look, well, a little shaky. This leads us to a really crucial concept, something criminologists have this cool, slightly ominous name for, the dark figure of crime. This is everything that's lurking in the shadows. It's the massive, gaping chasm between all the crime that actually happens and the tiny fraction that makes it into the official records. And let me tell you, that dark figure is enormous. So, how do we shine a light on this dark figure? Well, researchers have some clever tricks. They use things like victim surveys, big national questionnaires where they just ask thousands of people directly, hey, has anyone committed a crime against you this year? They also do self-report surveys, where they ask people, anonymously of course, so what crimes have you committed? And when you put it all together, you get a much, much more realistic picture of what's really going on. Okay, we've wrestled with theories, we've questioned the data, so now let's get down to brass tacks. What do we actually do about crime? How does society respond? It really comes down to two big things: trying to prevent it and deciding how to punish it when it happens. When you're talking about prevention, you're looking at two fundamentally different strategies. Do you focus on the situation itself, make it physically harder to commit the crime? Or do you go deeper and try to tackle the root causes, the poverty, the lack of jobs, the social issues that might be pushing people towards crime to begin with? And this is where those theories we talked about come roaring back into practice. Remember right realism, with its focus on rational choice? Well, that leads directly to something called situational crime prevention. This approach isn't trying to solve the world's problems. It's much more direct. It's about target hardening, a great phrase, right? We're talking more CCTV, stronger doors, security guards, brighter streetlights. The whole idea is to just make it so difficult and risky to commit the crime that the potential offender just thinks, you know what, forget it, not worth the hassle. But what happens when prevention fails and a crime is committed? What's the point of punishment anyway? I mean, what are we actually trying to achieve? Because the goals are all over the place and they often pull in opposite directions. Are we trying to just lock someone up so they can't hurt anyone else? That's incapacitation. Or are we trying to fix them, to rehabilitate them? Maybe we're just trying to scare other people straight. That's deterrence. Or is it about simple revenge, an eye for an eye? That's retribution. And then there's the idea of repairing the damage done to the victim, which is reparation. Our justice system is constantly trying to juggle all of these competing ideas at once. It's a real balancing act. Okay, for our last piece of the puzzle, I want us to take a big step back and zoom all the way out. Because our ideas about crime, what we fear, who we blame, it doesn't just come from academic theories or cold hard stats. It's shaped powerfully by the stories we see and hear every single day. And who's the biggest storyteller of all? The media, of course. But here's the thing you have to remember. News isn't a perfect mirror of reality. News outlets have what they call news values. It's like a checklist for what makes a good story. Is it dramatic? Is it immediate and personal? Does it involve someone famous? Is it violent? If a crime story ticks those boxes, it gets blasted everywhere. The result? Our entire perception of crime gets distorted. We end up being terrified of the dramatic, rare stuff, while often ignoring the much more common, everyday crimes. And it gets even more complicated. Even the simple idea of who counts as a victim is up for debate. On one side, you have what's called positive victimology, which looks for patterns. What makes a person or a place more likely to be targeted? But then critical victimology comes along and says, hold on, you're missing the big picture. They argue that you have to look at who has power and who doesn't. They point out that the state, the system itself, often gets to decide who officially gets the label of victim and whose suffering gets ignored. So that's where we'll leave it. From deep theories about human nature, all the way to how a TV news producer picks a story for the nightly broadcast, our entire idea of crime isn't just a fact. It's built, it's constructed, piece by piece, by all these different forces, all with their own agendas. And that leaves us with one last, really important question to chew on. If our view of crime is a construction, who are the architects? And what kind of world are they building for us?